Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Hello there! As we venture forward, we wanted to offer you a dose of nostalgia from Something Scary for the next upcoming weeks. For those of you who have been following us for a while, you might recall these compilations we used to put together. Well, we decided to bring them back. We hope you enjoy these scary compilations.
I was in college and on my way home from a short solo weekend trip. I lived in a dorm on campus, but with the number of times my mom would call or text me, it felt like I never moved out at all. The entire trip, she constantly texted me for updates to make sure I was okay. She'd also send me news articles about the bad things that have happened to women while traveling alone. Sometimes I just flat out ignored her. I didn't like feeling suffocated. While I was packing, I realized I didn't have enough room in my suitcase to fit all the souvenirs and presents I bought. So before heading to the bus station, I purchased a new burgundy suitcase to fill with the excess items. After I arrived at my destination and gathered my bags, I went outside to call a taxi, ignoring a call from my mom as I did so. It was a weekend evening and super crowded. I kept bumping into other people also waiting for their car. There were a couple times when I was almost completely shoved to the ground. It was super annoying. I finally got a car and headed home. As I dragged my bags up the stairs, I felt weak. I didn't remember the bags being that heavy, but I figured I was probably just exhausted from traveling. I went to open my new suitcase so I could sort out the gifts, but there was a lock I didn't recognize. I sighed in frustration. Of course I grabbed the wrong bag, probably when I was in that crowd. I remember feeling extra annoyed knowing that I hadn't put a lock on my bag. I was never seeing those gifts again. I kept looking all over for any sign of identification when I felt the bag move. I stepped back. Pretty sure I just imagined that. I nudged the bag with my foot, and the suitcase moved again. Then I heard what sounded like a muffled voice crying in pain. It sounded human. I grabbed my hammer and started hacking at the lock, desperately trying to break it open. After a couple of tries, I was successful. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a young girl, her limbs bound and her mouth covered. She was scrawny and pale. I untied her and gave her water and asked her how she got in there, but she was much too weak to speak. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but before I could, I was receiving a call. I almost swiped to ignore it, thinking it was my mom, but it was an unknown number. I had put my information on the luggage tag of my suitcase, so I figured that whoever was calling might have been whoever put this girl in the bag. Hello? I believe you have my bag, Venus. Shit, he knows my name. Yeah, I must have grabbed the wrong one. Let's meet at the playground on Mason Street and switch. I started panicking. What the hell was I supposed to do? I decided to call my uncle, who was a police officer. After I explained the situation to him, he came up with a plan. We were first going to take the girl to the nearest hospital, and then he was going to escort me to the meeting spot. Before we left, I stuffed the suitcase with stones to make it look heavy. Then, I slipped a stone in my pocket, just in case. We got to the playground a little earlier than the agreed upon meeting time. My uncle hid in some bushes, never taking his sight off of me. A black car pulled up. Out stepped a very tall, ugly man, wearing a lot of layers. He stopped a few feet in front of me and rolled my bag towards me. Then he gestured for me to do the same. Of course, it didn't roll that far because of the weight. So the man took a couple steps towards me. I went to collect my bag, and when I was near him, he grabbed my wrist. The lock, it's missing. My heart was racing. He knew. He knew that I knew what was in his suitcase. What was he gonna do with me? My adrenaline was coursing through me. He gripped my wrist tighter and pulled me closer. You look young. How old did you say you were? I quickly pulled out the stone from my pocket and threw it at the man's head. He let go of me and screamed in pain. I grabbed my bag and ran towards the other end of the playground. Behind me, I could hear my uncle emerge from the bush and order the man to put his hands up. And then I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital. My uncle was there and told me that the man had been arrested. He had been part of a huge trafficking ring that smuggled children through low-security bus stations. I asked if the girl was going to be okay. Although she was making a swift physical recovery, it would take a much longer time for her to heal from the trauma. That girl was so young. I thought about the obsessive texts and calls from my mom and no longer thought she was crazy. I'm lucky. That girl could have been me.
Arjun, a young Indian man, was tilling his father's crops when a large cobra surprised him in the field. Instinctively, he drove his rake into the snake and killed it instantly. He immediately regretted killing the reptile, but had to finish his work before what the weather reports were saying would be the worst storm of the year. Once the storm hit, everyone in the town of Kimsa sheltered in their homes, including Arjun and his father. Thunder cracked over and over as an unending stream of lightning bolts danced across the sky. Arjun peered out the window and through the heavy sheets of rain, saw a young woman wandering the street in front of his house. The wind pushed her about until she fell to the ground, and Arjun sprang to his feet and ran outside. He lifted the woman out of the puddles and offered his home as protection until the storm passed. The woman was so grateful for the help. She explained that she had missed her bus and thought she could make her way home before the storm hit. Arjun lit the fire while his father went to make hot tea. Finally, getting a good look at her, Arjun was mesmerized by her beauty. "I'm Fatima," she said as her deep brown eyes pierced his soul. The house shook with each boom of thunder, and the lights flickered as the wind picked up speed outside and shook the power lines. Arjun and Fatima lit candles while his father barred the doors and windows. The storm was expected to rage for hours, and there would be much destruction to contend with afterwards. Arjun just hoped their house would survive the night. Fatima suggested they play 20 questions to get to know one another. Soon, Fatima learned that Arjun had been working on the farm since he was 9, and Arjun learned that Fatima worked in town and had recently lost her husband. During dinner, Arjun's father went over the young man's chores, and that's when Arjun remembered the snake. Filling his father in on the guilt he felt made the man chuckle. "That snake would have ruined the crops. You did the right thing. Let's just hope it wasn't an Ichhadhari Nagin," his father joked. His father explained that if a snake lived for 100 years without doing harm, it became sacred and was granted the power to transform into whatever it wanted. The snake Arjun saw looked like a cobra, and his father asked if he had seen its mate. Arjun shook his head. He hadn't. "Then you're fine, because if there's a mate, they are not to be separated. And if one of them is killed, the other will seek revenge," his father jokingly hissed at Arjun and then began cleaning up the plates. Even though he knew his father was teasing him, he still felt worried. Fatima then put her hand on Arjun's. "It was only folklore," she said. Arjun relaxed and focused on the fondness he began to feel for his guest. But slowly, Fatima's gentle embrace grew tighter. At first, this made Arjun smile, but as she continued to squeeze, Arjun's fear returned. Her nails dug into his skin, and his bones began to creak. Arjun screamed in pain. Arjun's father ran into the room just as Fatima began to transform. Her eyes turned yellow, and her skin separated into scales as it turned a shiny black. The woman's hair fused together into a hooded shape, and finally, the hand squeezing Arjun's hand tighter and tighter became her tail. She writhed before them, her transformation back into a giant cobra, was now complete.
You killed my husband, and now you and your family will pay,
she hissed. Her head then snapped forward like lightning and bit into Arjun. Her fangs sunk into him, but released only a small amount of venom, just enough to render him immobile. Arjun watched helplessly as the giant cobra whipped her tail around his father's legs and pulled the man hard to the floor. The cobra made a pleased hiss as she slowly dragged Arjun's begging and screaming father across the floor towards her fearsome maw. Her cobra head rose above Arjun's father and his eyes widened. Her first strike was to his jugular, ripping flesh and veins apart. Arjun's father gasped for sounds he could no longer make as she swallowed his windpipe. She then struck his stomach, ripping his organs, sending them flying through the house. And finally, while Arjun watched his father struggle with consciousness, Fatima punctured the patriarch's eyes with her fangs and released her poison into his brain. Tears streamed down Arjun's paralyzed face. Soon, the poison would wear off, and he would be left there alone with his dead father and a lifetime of guilt. The Ichhad Hari Nagin slithered from the farmhouse and found her way to her mate. She coiled up next to its lifeless body and looked into its dead eyes again, where she then saw the image of its killer, Arjun, slowly fade away. The cobra, Fatima, looked to the raging heavens above her and said,
I'm ready.
Her serpentine gods heard her plea, and a bolt of lightning surged through the sky and struck her down. She took her last earthly breath, joining her mate in the afterlife, where the two lovers could be together forever.
Addie transferred schools in the middle of the academic year. Being the new kid was hard enough, but being very quiet and shy made it more difficult to adjust. She desperately tried to make herself as invisible as possible, but still always felt different. During lunch, she sat by herself, and she stayed on the sidelines during gym. And whenever the teacher took attendance or began to ask the class questions, Addie would slink down low in the chair, and then she would start to bite her nails, or what little was left of them. In math one day, Daryl noticed that Addie had bitten her nails so low, she had drawn blood. A nasty note circulated throughout the classroom. It was a drawing of Addie as a vampire with blood dripping from her lips. Her classmates snickered at her at the accurate yet cruel drawing. The mocking only added to Addie's anxiety. When she noticed her cuticles were bleeding, she'd switch over to chewing on one of her pencils, or she would distractedly chomp on her hair. Her classmates were so repulsed by this. These odd tics were so noticeable, even her teacher was so concerned. She eventually asked Addie to stay after class to talk, but having attention drawn to her only made Addie's nerves worse. She began to sweat and she clutched her belly. The nerves made the flutters inside her feel stronger, a carnivorous pit right in her gut. The pain was all so consuming. Addie told her teacher she knew she was different, and it stressed her out. Her parents had assured her that no one in school would understand the real her, and she would try to keep to herself and focus on the schoolwork and survive the rest of the year. The teacher scoffed at what she felt was terrible parenting advice. She assured Addie all new students felt this way, and she would be fine. It would just take some time. Over the next few weeks, Addie felt like everyone's eyes were on her. She began frequently asking to go to the bathroom, but the teachers caught on and refused. One day, her leg was shaking so furiously, Addie pleaded with the teacher, causing a terrible scene. Addie could feel her stomach churn as she desperately begged. Some of the kids looked on, laughing, and the teacher eventually relented and gave her a hall pass. Addie quickly raced off to the bathroom, but didn't return within the usual amount of time. Another classmate was sent to check in on her, Frida. Frida was a sweet and shy person herself, and when she entered the bathroom, it seemed empty, aside from a stall at the far end. Besides the knock of the plumbing, she heard what sounded like a hungry animal gnawing at something. "Addie?" she asked. No reply. Frida bent down to see if she could spot her classmate's shoes in the end of the stall, but nothing. She figured Addie was hiding, maybe from the strange noises. "Addie?" she called again. This time, the sound stopped. Frida announced herself and swore that she was just there to make sure that Addie was okay, and yet still no answer. Frida continued, telling her she knew what it was like to be nervous. Frida gave a shaky laugh and admitted up till that point that she too had been afraid to speak to Addie, even though she wanted to since the beginning, since they seemed so much alike. Signs of movement came from the stall as Addie put her feet down. She called through the door to Frida, asking if what she said was really true, if she really felt nervous. Frida assured her that she also got that feeling of utter dread in the pit of her stomach, the one that makes you feel like you're going to die. "Yes," replied Frida. Addie let out a huge sigh of relief. She was so glad that she no longer felt alone. Someone understood. Maybe she wasn't the only one of her kind in the school like her parents had presumed. She excitedly emerged from the stall. Frida gasped and momentarily forgot how to breathe. Noticing Frida's silent scream, Addie's eyebrows furrowed in concern. "What's wrong, friend?" Frida stared at the missing limb, her body trembling. Addie looked at the stump, blood beginning to soak through the napkin, and added curiously, "Wait, don't yours grow back too?"
I don't know about you, but I was determined to stick to my New Year's resolutions this year. And the biggest one was staying active, and I needed to remain hydrated throughout that process. Whether you hydrate to live or live to hydrate, Liquid IV quenches your thirst faster than water alone. I personally love it, and I really do use it. All you need is one stick plus 16 ounces of water. My favorite flavor is lemon lime, which is classic. You can never go wrong. And it has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. So I really do feel so much better when I'm drinking it. And there's 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Plus, it's non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. However you hydrate, grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier, sugar-free in bulk, nationwide at Costco, or get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code SCARY at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code SCARY at liquidiv.com.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.